Why do so many B2B business owners struggle to actually scale their business? Why does it feel like no matter what you do, you always hit a revenue ceiling that you just can't get past? Well, I interviewed over 66, 7, and 8 figure entrepreneurs and business leaders from 12 different countries asking this exact question. And the results, they'll surprise you. In this video, I'm going to be going through the key insights I took from the conversation so you can take the lessons and move forward in your business. I also wrote a 34-page white paper report based on these conversations. So if you would like to just take a copy of this and give it a read, the link is in the description. If you don't know who I am, my name is Saeed Chowdhury. I'm the founder here at SRC an advertising firm that helps B2B and professional services firms scale their high-ticket, high-value offers through paid advertising. We take a holistic approach to growth, from cold to close, from cold to cash in the bank. We come in, we build an advertising engine from end to end and run it for them to help them scale. Before I get into the actual video, if you want to check out what we actually do in a little bit more detail, I have my website linked in the description below. Feel free to go there, watch the video on the landing page and get a better feel of what SRCGP actually does. But let's not waste any more time. Let's just jump straight into it. So one of the actual biggest insights that I actually gathered from the conversations was the differences between a 6-figure entrepreneur and business owner versus a 7 and 8-figure entrepreneur and business owner. And you might say that that's obvious, right? But the approach that they're actually taking to building the organization, brand, but also client acquisition is stark and very different to what you would typically see with the smaller firms. And that's really what I want to touch on today in the client acquisition side of things and how their approach differs so much when it comes to smaller firms versus the larger firms, right? And I'm sure you would be privy to know that most professional services or B2B businesses typically grow through their network, through word of mouth, and through their referrals, right? And that's the key aspect that we saw throughout, right? So all of these businesses were growing through networking, business development, being prospecting, going out and kind of farming, word of mouth, and referrals. These were the 4 fundamental elements that we saw that tracked all the way from 6-figure to 8-figure businesses. It was really the next level that I wanted to talk about because the high 7-figure and 8-figure businesses were really approaching things in a very different way to what you typically see from other B2B businesses in the earlier cycles. And that's why it looks like they've been able to scale to the levels that they have. And that's what they say. But it actually reminds me of a lesson that Alex Hormozy teaches. And it's not my lesson, but he talks about the core 4. And what are the core 4? Well, when you market or when you're looking to acquire clients, there's only 4 fundamental ways of actually being able to actually acquire customers, right? So you talk to people you know and people you don't, right? And then you talk to them in a 1-to-1 or 1-to-many. And so what we find here is that there is a key differentiator in actually generating those opportunities and actually acquiring customers, right? So what are each of these sections? So the people you know, right? This is what we call warm outreach. So this can be anywhere from speaking to your own network, speaking to contacts that you have, speaking to referrals, word of mouth growth, and so on and so forth. People you don't know, this is what we call cold outreach, right? This could be cold calling, this could be cold email, this could be cold DMs, LinkedIn DMs, whatever it might be. Anyone that doesn't know you and you're speaking in a 1-to-1 basis, it's cold outreach, right? Next is 1-to-many. And 1-to-many is quite obvious for most people. It's things like posting content. It's like going to conferences and so on and so forth. So that's what the 1-to-many is. You're speaking to a large group of people and you're hoping that a percentage of those will actually turn into customers. And then 1-to-many on the people you don't know. This is what we call paid ads, right? So you're sending out advertising and you're waiting for inbound opportunities to come in if they've seen your advertising. This is fundamentally the only ways you can actually grow your business, right? And what we found from these conversations, especially with the smaller firms, was they were heavy into this area and into this area, right? And posting content. And most of the time, it's primarily because it's warmer audiences, right? So warmer audiences typically know you, like you, trust you, understand who you are, and typically take longer to actually close in the back end. And so it could be really slow to scale, unpredictable in the way you are able to close opportunities. However, when they do come, they're much stickier, they trust you more, and you have a really good relationship with them. So, one to one is typically if you reach out to your network or you go to networking events or you speak to people you know, and so on and so forth. Very common in the world of B2B and professional services. What I found from the conversations was the key aspect that differentiated the best firms, the firms that are making the most money, is this: they understood that warm market is always capped at your network, and right, and small organizations, that's why they're very big on business development within the organization, right? Your employees, they're encouraged to go out and try and build their network and build opportunities to bring into the business, and so on and so forth, and it scales that way. But in these kinds of instances, it's scalable, but it's not reliable or predictable, right? Business will come in dribs and drabs, and you can't actually go and project the future. What they have mastered, or at least have been on the path to mastering, is these elements of actually mastering cold markets. And cold markets are people who don't know you, never heard of you, don't know you exist, and how you turn them into actual paying customers in the back end. And this is quite fundamentally the hardest element of growing businesses. But once you solve the problem or understand how to solve the problem, it becomes one of the most fruitful opportunities for you in scaling your business. And that's why when it feels like you're always hitting a ceiling in terms of revenue, you never can go, there's always going to be churn within the business, right? You're always going to be losing clients at some point, whether that's a 10% churn rate, 20% churn rate over a period of time. If you're an accounting firm or a tax firm, that might be lower because it's much stickier business. But if you're a management consulting firm or some other firm in that space, a strategy consulting firm or another consultant, typically you work off of projects and your engagements are project based. And so it might be a 3-month engagement and then the revenue stops coming from them unless you're able to upsell. And it becomes a bit more difficult to be able to do that. And there's no reliability. And so understanding exactly how to operate in cold markets and open up the market for yourself becomes a really powerful tool. Because otherwise, the common term you always hear amongst in the world of consulting or in the world of professional services or even B2B is feast and famine, right? People feel like they either get a lot of work or they go through periods where there's not much work going around. And how do you tackle that problem? Well, it's simply this: understanding how you can turn people who don't know you and turn them into actual customers. So, how do we do that? Well, having conversations with some of the brightest entrepreneurs that I've ever spoken to is really interesting. And it actually aligns with a lot of the lessons that we teach, right? Or we help our clients with. And there's a number of things that you can do, right? So, firstly, cold outreach is quite simply the cheapest way for you to tackle cold markets, right? You don't actually have to pay a huge amount of money to do it yourself, right? So you can get email domains, you can spin that up, and then you can start getting a list, and then you send out emails to that list. It's becoming more saturated than ever before because it's becoming easier to do it. And so your messaging has to be super, super clear. Your offer has to be incredibly cold traffic optimized. So, what do I mean by cold traffic optimized? That might be a better place to go next. So, a cold traffic optimized offer is something that is a no-brainer offer. And Alex Hormozy talks about this in his $1 Million Offers book, but it's essentially an irresistible offer. What is an irresistible offer? A cold traffic optimized offer, a lot of people actually confuse it for what their service is. And a cold traffic optimized offer is not what your service is. So if you provide tax services or tax planning, that is not a cold traffic optimized offer, right? So you shouldn't be sending cold traffic saying or calling people up saying, oh, we do tax planning. Like, what does that even mean? Why would someone just go, oh, you do tax planning? Like, you might have a really, really small percentage of people actually going, okay, I'm thinking about tax planning, let me go for it. But the reality is so many people are running cold outreach and doing this that you have to have something that will actually get someone on a booked call with you, like someone actually engaging with you and interested in learning more. So cold traffic optimized offer for, let's say, tax planning would be like, we can save you $20,000 in 30 days. And if we're not able to save you that much money in tax, you don't pay, right? And the reason why that is much more compelling is simply because, okay, the guy's going to save money, right? The lead is going to save money. There's no harm in it because I don't have to pay anything. And on the other side, the service provider, you would turn around and go, okay, you have to provide me with all this information. You have to provide me with your books and stuff like that. And within the 30-day period, what we will do is we will review all of your accounts and books and we will save you $20,000. And if we don't save that, then that's free work that you've got, and we might save you 15,000 or 12,000. And you go back to them saying, "Oh, we've only managed to save you 12,000, so you don't pay." But at that point, you would upsell them, going, "Look, we managed to save you 12,000. That clearly shows that what you're doing with your current CPA or accountant isn't working. Are you interested in learning more about how we could save you even more taxes if you actually engage us?" And there's the upsell. That's where you get them and going, "Oh, okay, yeah, you showed value. You showed that you're competent. You showed that you're actually good at what you do." And then you're able to go, okay, well, now this engagement will cost X amount a month, and then you go into the sales process, right? So it's really important to get them into the ecosystem, and then you can work on actually delivering the services that you have. But that's why it's so important to have a cold traffic optimized offer. And this can be appropriate to any kind of industry. If it's a fractional CFO, it would be something like an assessment that you can do to do a runway or a projection, whatever it might be, right? Having an audit and assessment as an entry point is always helpful. So think about that when you're running a cold outreach. Next, so cold outreach could be emails, it could be cold calling, it could be cold DMs. And these are actually relatively cheap to be able to do. Like once you got the leads, you just pick up the phone and you have a conversation. Simple. That in itself is an art. And naturally, you have to have a thick skin with cold outreach because you're going to get a lot of no's, a lot more no's than yeses. But the yeses, if you do it right, you can upsell them and create a good lifetime value. And the ROI becomes really worth it, right? Next is paid advertising, right? So paid advertising is quite simply more expensive, but it speeds up your rate to scale. And this is what we typically recommend to all of our clients if they are at a point where they have product market fit, whether that is a clear cold traffic optimized offer, or we work on creating an offer for them and they want to actually scale and they have the actual funding to be able to do that. And paid ads is naturally, if you don't have a system or an ecosystem that works, it's a risky game because you can actually burn through cash. So if you don't have an actual mechanism in the back end to actually convert these leads, what ends up happening is you pay these ad platforms a lot of money. You don't get the leads you want. You feel like you've burnt through it. You feel like there's no hope on the back end, and then you stop. And that's really not the best way to do paid ads. You really want to be focusing on exactly how you can actually scale the business. And there's going to be an investment cost in it when doing paid ads. But in the back end, if you've got enough leads and you have a structured sales process, you then can actually get a return on the investment and get a ROAS on the investment, whether that's 3x, 4x, or 5x, based off of your upsells, your LTV, and your actual sales process. So that's super, super important. So those are kind of like some of the strategies, what I've seen from speaking to these entrepreneurs that they're using to scale their business. Most people are scared to do this, which is absolutely fine. You can be scared, especially if you haven't actually done it before. That's why you always really want to, especially at the start, you really want to bring in an expert to be able to run this for you and even hand it off to you by showing you the ropes and showing you what they're doing, even building out a system for you so that you can run it yourself. That way, you understand the process and you're not risking as much advertising dollars and then getting no outcome and then feeling like you've wasted a lot of money. At least with an actual expert in what they do, what can happen is you can come in, even if you get a small ROAS or a break even amount, at least you understand you haven't lost any money. And then you can go in the back end and go, okay, well, now I know what to do and I know it can work. And then it's just a case of training the algorithm, pixel conditioning, all things that I talk about in my other video, which I'll link here if you want to know the type of systems that we use to help business owners and our clients to scale their businesses and generate much, much more revenue through paid advertising. So you can check that out. But yeah, so those are really two of the elements that we've seen work super, super well. Obviously, there's things that people talk about with content, SEO, that type of stuff. And that really falls into this bucket here, the one-to-many. SEO really works into the one-to-one, and these are much longer in terms of sales cycle compared to these. If you have a structured system that actually has a sales process in the back end, you can close a lot of these deals and opportunities. The problem is most people find it difficult because you have to hear no a lot of times. And that's just the truth with cold outreach and cold markets. Most of the market are not ready to buy yet. But the idea is you want to bring them into your ecosystem and make it compelling enough, the offer, for them to actually go, okay, you know what? There's no risk. And may as well go for it. Most people don't know what's good for them. Fundamentally, most people don't know what's good for them. And sometimes if you feel like you have an offer that can actually help someone go through and solve a problem that they are having, it's your duty to actually solve that problem for them. And you have to make it as easy for them as possible to make the decision, because fundamentally people are scared to make any decisions, right? And that's where we come in with the sales process. And what we saw with a lot of the better or larger organizations was they have a really good sales process. And the reason why they have a really good sales process is because they have to. They are approaching cold markets differently to the smaller firms, which means that they would lose out on the investment that they're making if they don't have actual salespeople in the organization that have scripts that they work off of, that have a specific structure that they work off of to actually close deals in the back end, right? And if you're not doing this, then that's the problem. Whether it's a lead generation issue or a sales process issue, you only find this out by actually getting into the process. That's fundamentally what we learned and some of the insights that I've got. If you're interested in actually reading more about it, there's a whole section in the 34-page white paper report I wrote based on remote selling, which some of the best organizations or the larger organizations are really leaning into. Post-COVID and post-pandemic, what happened was more business owners and CEOs were comfortable in actually doing sales over Zoom, right? And following that, what's happened is the market has opened up, the opportunities have opened up, and you can actually do high ticket sales through Zoom conversations and actually sharing your value proposition. And that's where the sales process element actually comes in, and having a structured process in the back end. I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you're interested in actually reading more about what exactly is involved in the white paper and the conversation I had, we did over 80 hours of interviews with these entrepreneurs. So feel free to grab a copy of the white paper. It's in the description. If you want to learn more about what we do, feel free to visit the website and book a call. I'd love to have a conversation with you to learn a little bit more about what your business is and tell you a little bit about what we might be able to do for you if there is a fit, and then we can go from there. But otherwise, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.